Cheers! In this program, I'm going to do a product review of the Spider Fermer gravity-fed watering system right here behind me. I'm also going to tell you about some tests I did with this system, and I've discovered a few things that are really important to know. And finally, I'm going to describe a new project. This is a year-long project. My goal is to grow tomatoes and harvest tomatoes for a full year inside. Now, I've grown tomatoes for 45 years outside, but I've never grown too many inside. A few hydroponically, but never in a grow tent. So I'm going to use this self-watering system, the Spider Fermer grow tent, the Spider Fermer LED light system, and my goal is to collect tomatoes every week for a year. I'll tell you a little bit more about the project at the end. Now, there's one other very important topic I'd like to mention. I've written a book, a 75-page ebook called Growing Great Tomatoes. It tells you everything you need to know about growing tomatoes, and you can get it for free. And I'll put a link to that in the description and at the end of the video. Spider Fermer refers to the system in a couple different ways. It's a gravity-fed watering system. It's also a self-watering system. When I first found out about this, I started calling it a wicking system. And I'm going to discuss wicking in a little more detail later. The advantage of this system is that there's no pump, there's no electricity. We're going to let gravity feed the water to our pots and our plants. That lowers your costs, also lowers the equipment you need. That means less maintenance in the long run. I've laid out the system here from start to finish, and I'm going to go through each part. The first one here is the reservoir. This is a plastic bag. It's reinforced with some sort of material inside. It's quite a heavy-duty bag. It has plastic legs to stand up nice, and then this shutoff valve here. It also has a lid if you want to get this covered. It's a 50-liter reservoir. But you can't actually use all 50 liters because there's a certain amount that gets trapped down here under the valve, and that won't come out. That's about 15 liters. So that leaves you with 35 liters of usable space, which is about 9 gallons. I set this inside the grow tent, and as you can see, it's a fairly good size, and it took up the room of one of my plants. So in my 3x3 grow tent, I could only have 3 plants plus this. But I found out that the grow tent actually has an inlet close to the ground where the feed from this can come in. And so a lot of people keep this bag outside of the grow tent. Of course, then you have the issue that if there's any leakage here, it's not going to be trapped by the grow tent. It's going to be on your floor. So I think what I'm going to do is take this, set it in one of these reservoirs, and have this outside the grow tent. That way, if I get a little bit of leakage here, it's trapped in here and not going all over my floor. The next piece of equipment along the line is this here. This end attaches to the reservoir. Water flows down this tube into this little valve. And this is a float valve. So if the system is low in water, this float valve drops down. That lets water come in. Once the system fills up, the float valve goes up, shuts off the flow of water, and you just wait until it gets low again, and then some more water will come in. Nice thing about this is it doesn't take any electricity. It's just a simple float valve, which should last you a long time. Now, it's a little hard to get these apart. They just pop apart. There's no special valve. You just have to use enough force to pop them open. The water goes from a float valve into one of these reservoirs. Now, the system comes 2 different ways. You can get a system with 2 of these or 4 of these. And I have the 2 reservoir system. Now, price-wise, the 4 reservoir system sells for about 180 Canadian, which is 130 US. Now, at the moment, it is on sale, at least in Canada. The reservoir really has 2 main parts. One is the base. This will hold the water. So this will fill up to a certain point and be full of water all the time. Then there's a top piece that sits on top of this. You put your grow bag on here. There are a couple plastic pieces that hold this up, and they fit on top of these posts, but quite honestly, they don't sit on there very well, and they fall off easily. So put them on and turn it over gently. There are a number of different holes on top, And the reason they did that was so that you could insert the wicks for different size grow bags. Put the wicks in the largest holes you can, but you want to make sure that when the grow bag's on top, the wicks are all covered. You don't want them sticking out the side. If they do, just move them to one of the holes that's closer to the center. So let's talk about these wicks for a second. They draw up water quite well. And the idea is that the water comes up the wicks, across the top here. And because they're touching the grow bags, the water goes into the grow bags, goes into the soil, and then goes up the pot to fill the soil with moisture. But it has its limitations. The main one is that you don't have a lot of control over how much water goes into the pot. The pot will touch this, some water will go up, and then it might go to the top of the pot or it might not. I'm going to have a look at that in a second. All right, so let's say you got the system set up and it's watering your pots. How do you fertilize? Well, you do have a couple options here. You can put your fertilizer solution right in your reservoir and then you're fertilizing all the time. Now that's what I do when I hand water plants. I'm continually adding fertilizer when I water. The other option is that you can simply put water in the reservoir and then add your fertilizer by hand. And these lids have been designed so that if water pours through the grow bags, it will come out the bottom and into this catch basin here and run into the reservoir. So you can water from the top, and as long as not too much water is coming through, the reservoir will catch it. And then the wicks will keep moving it back up again. So that should work fine. There's another thing I discussed with Spider Fermer, and that is the efficiency of these wicks to move water into the grow bag. And they recommended to me that you should only use their brand of grow bag. And you do get a number of these with the kit. I've used grow bags before, and these are pretty similar to what I've used. The material feels like the same kind of material. I'm not sure there's a great difference in grow bags, but I guess if you want to follow the instructions from Spider Fermer, you're going to limit yourself to their grow bag. To be honest, I don't think it really makes a lot of difference, provided you buy a good quality grow bag. Before I set this up in my grow tent, I wanted to test it, and I thought this is the perfect place. If I spill something here, it doesn't matter, and if there's a leak, I have a drain over here on the left so all the water will run away. I just wanted to see how the thing works. I plumbed it all up. I prepared 2 grow bags. They're about 3/4 full with soil, and I'm using ProMix here. Now, peat moss based media doesn't absorb water very well when it's dry, so I pre-wetted this material. It's not soaking wet, but it is moist. And I know from experience that that's moist enough to draw in any water. I set up the 2 reservoirs, turned on the tap, water started flowing. This unit here started wicking water almost immediately. That one over there didn't wick water at all. I was a little surprised at that. But here was the problem. This tubing is over top of this tubing, but it's only about 1 inch high. But that was enough to stop water from moving over there. And the reason was that this part of the tube was still full of air. So the air acts as a trap. It doesn't allow the water to go all the way through. And once I lowered this down a bit and got the water moving, it works fine. It's just something you have to be aware of when you first set these up. In fact, now that there's water on both sides of this high point, you can actually raise it up about that high and it still flows fine. So it's really not an issue in running the system, but it is something you should be aware of. I wanted to see how well the wicking system works, so I put some paper towel on, and I put this on top just to hold the paper towel down. Well, you can see in about an hour or so, the whole paper towel was wet. So the water's coming up through the wicks, coming across the paper towel. If you want to test to see if the water's coming up through the wicks, you can touch them, and they're definitely wet. Or you can just put a fresh paper towel on and pat it down. And you can clearly see where the water's starting to absorb. The paper towel is going to work just like the bucket. It's going to absorb some water. The system has now been running for about 5 days. What I noticed was that the soil is not getting any wetter. It's about the same moisture as when I started. In fact, in this grow bag here, you can easily see the top here, and it's starting to dry, and you can see the difference in color. Moisture is not getting from here to here. I spoke to Spider Fermer about this issue of the moisture not getting up into the soil, and they pointed out to me that I'm actually using the system incorrectly. What they recommend is that when the seedlings are really small, and in my case they're not even planted yet, the system doesn't really work for that. It's not going to draw up enough moisture. Here's a table of their recommendation. They're really only recommending this system for plants that are quite large, where the root system has gotten down to the bottom of the fabric pots, and then they get moisture. That points out one of the limitations here. But that still leaves me with a question. Once plants are large enough, they have deeper roots and they can get at the moisture. But that does not increase the wicking action. Just because there's roots at the bottom of the bag does not mean moisture is going to travel all the way up to the top of the bag. What this means is that only the roots in the bottom of the bag are ever going to be watered with this system. I mean, that works okay if all of your roots are in the bottom, but as these plants get larger and larger, they're going to fill this bag of root. And the ones at the top are also going to want to get watered. And if they're not watered, the plant's not going to grow so well. At least that's my theory. In the year-long testing that I'm going to do with these systems, I'm going to have a closer look at that. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the wicking system that's used here. One of the other review sites on YouTube made the comment that the wicking system provides the exact amount that your plants need. That's rubbish. The wicks will drop water until the soil reaches a certain level of saturation, and that depends on the soil. For example, when we use wicking systems for streptocarpus and African violets, we adjust the soil by adding a lot more perlite. If you use straight Promex or a peat moss potting media, it would be too wet for the plant. The wicks are too good, they drop too much water. So we adjust the soil by adding in perlite to make them drier. It's the only control you really have over a wicking system. I mean, the other control you do have is to use different thicknesses of wicks. But in this system here, we're trying to water quite a large reservoir, and you're certainly not going to want to go to smaller wicks. The nice thing about a wicking system is that it's kind of automatic. You can forget it. There's no electricity, no pumps, no complication. It's a simple system. But in most wicking systems, we take the wick and we actually put it right up inside the pot, somewhere in the center of the pot, so that there's enough moisture going up. This system is designed not to work that way. In this system, the wicks stay outside the pot and only touch the bottom. So there is a limit as to how much moisture will go up. Based on my limited testing, I don't think the wicking system is enough to bring enough moisture into the pot. In fact, Spider Fermer says as much. Don't use it for seedlings because their roots are near the top where it's going to be too dry. You have to grow them to a certain size before there's enough moisture to keep them going. My plan is to compare this system to overhead watering and see how they compare. And I'm going to do that in my year-long experiment where I'm growing tomato plants in the grow tent. Now let me tell you a little bit about that project. I have a 3x3 Spider Fermer grow tent and a good set of LED lights from Spider Fermer. And I'm going to grow 4 tomato plants. 2 different types. 2 of them will be on this wicking system, and 2 will be in a regular fabric pot where I water by hand. And we'll see how the 2 compare. My goal for this project is that I want to harvest tomatoes every week for a year. I'm going to put a link to the setup for this experiment at the end of this video. But if you want to get all the updates for the whole year, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell so you get notified. And if you'd like to learn more about growing great tomatoes, hop on over to my website, gardenmyths.com, and get a free copy of my ebook, 75 pages, everything you need to know, at least for growing tomatoes outside. Happy gardening.